I just was sick of being sick all the time and being in so much pain, and I knew it wasn't right.
It was a razor-sharp, searing pain. I just was so confused and terrified.
I've been to the point where I'm like, can someone just take me out to the yard and shoot me?
Research shows women's pain is less understood and more mistreated than men's. It's known as the gender pain gap, or bias in the health system. A study's found 55% of women feel their pain has been ignored or dismissed. Of those, 32% feel it was because their GP didn't take their pain seriously. From waiting longer for a diagnosis to being prescribed less effective drugs, women are sick and tired of medical misogyny.
Well, I've broken my back skiing and I've been run over by a train, and I can tell you, I can tell you endometriosis pain is worse.
It took years for doctors to diagnose Gabrielle's endometriosis.
It wasn't just period pain, it was kind of leg pain, diarrhea, headaches. I had a female GP and she used to say, some women have bad period pain, you get over it, basically. And eventually I insisted on going to see a gynecologist, and I started talking for like 30 seconds and he said, oh, I think you've got endometriosis.
After years of being gaslit, it's relief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you remember when you got that diagnosis? Did you burst into tears?
Yes,
how did you react?
Absolutely. I burst into tears because I felt, thank God, I'm not totally bad. I wrote myself off as a hypochondriac.
Imelda, talk to me about the pain that you've endured for 40 years. It's a long time.
It is a really long time. My UTI started when I was 17. I went and got treatment and I was able to get over that infection with antibiotics. But to my horror, I got them again and again and again, and this went on for years and years and decades.
Outdated tests missed Imelda's chronic urinary tract infections.
At a certain point, the tests started to come back as negative. And this is a big problem with urinary tract infections because the tests are very outdated. I have had some kind doctors over the years, but some other times I've been laughed at by a doctor. Right. I've been told that it's all in my head.
So you run the Women's Hospital in Melbourne.
I do.
Do these stories surprise you, anger you?
They don't surprise me and they do anger me.
Why aren't women believed when they go to a doctor with chronic pain?
I think there's centuries of stigma. So women have been seen as the weaker sex, or they've been also seen as, because they have childbirth, they can tolerate pain, or the diagnosis of hysteria.
Talk to me about that. What is that?
So the word hyster is uterus in Greek. And so it became an official diagnosis for many, many years that women were hysterical. So that's the diagnosis until 1980. It's not that long ago. I also look at medical training in particular. Medical knowledge doubles every 73 days.
Wow.
And I think that that's a challenge for all of us in the medical and healthcare professions to keep up with that education and knowledge.
Do women and men experience pain differently?
So there are things that only women experience, so endometriosis would be an example of that. There are things that women experience disproportionately to men, so migraines is an example of that. And there are things that women experience differently to men, and that would be a heart attack is a good example. You know, when you look at movies and television, the typical heart attack is someone, grabbing at their chest. Women don't always experience that. It might be jaw pain, it might be shoulder pain. So it may not be that sense of pain that everybody thinks. And if you're taught that that's the symptoms of a heart attack, a woman goes in, you don't think that she's having a heart attack. So women are much less likely to be admitted to an intensive care unit. When they have a heart attack. They're also much more likely to be given anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication rather than pain medication, because that's what they've been taught.
The main issue, I think, when it comes to women's health is that science just never really studied women's bodies. So most of the knowledge we have about human health comes from studying men.
The rationale that they didn't include women is because they've got hormonal swings and they've got all these different changes, and so it'll mess up all the research, and it'll be too complicated and too complex. And it's been decades and decades that we've been fighting to get that change.
You have suffered debilitating migraines. What's that been like?
Where I kind of became really challenging for me was more around the stigma of migraines when I entered the workforce. Like, people tend to use the word migraine when it's not a migraine, so then when the actual migraine sufferers have to,
Explain what it's like, because it's not just a headache. You don't just take a Bex and have a lie down.
No.
What does a migraine look like for you?
So in bed, all dark, nauseous. I'll get like an aura around my eyesight, sensitive to noise.
And the pain in your head?
Correct. Like someone taking a knife and just stabbing it in your head.
Do you ever think about how life would have been different for you had you not had to struggle with chronic illness for much of it?
It makes me sad. I often feel like, what could I have done with my career if I hadn't been so tired?
Does it feel like a grief?
Yes, it does feel like a grief. It's a loss of the things that you might have been able to do. It's just been too much focus on health and not enough on the fun things of life, really.
Doctors are finally taking women seriously. There's now a National Women's Health Advisory Council, and Sue is co-chairing Australia's first inquiry into gendered pain.
How do you change that unconscious bias as well that some medical professionals have towards women?
Part of it is the education programs, and we've got to really get back to a different way of teaching.
It's not because doctors don't care about women. I think most doctors go into medicine because they want to help.
Yeah.
This is a systemic problem. There's a massive knowledge gap, and they're not taught that there's a massive knowledge gap.
What would you say to women who don't feel like they're being heard?
To learn as much as you can about your condition. Present with records of your pain, book a long session and allow the doctor time to take it all in, and don't put up with being dismissed.
Don't keep going to the person who won't listen to you. Go to the person who will listen to you and talk you through it, understand it, learn, get the longer appointment, and that consistent person.
Be your own advocate.
Yeah, as much as you can. And advocate for other people when they can't.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an incredibly important conversation to have, and some amazing women there who are willing to open up. I'm a chronic migraine sufferer. I've had migraines for years, and one of the things that it's particularly hard for me is light sensitivity, and my job is to be in front of lights. Sadly, you have all witnessed this. I've done this show with a bucket underneath the desk, worrying that I was going to vomit from a migraine. So it is one of those things that I really hope people take more seriously. I've been so lucky to have medical professionals that have listened to me and heard me, but I have countless friends who've suffered from endometriosis and other issues that haven't been heard. And so, yeah, it's a really important story. Thanks for bringing us in.
Thanks for sharing, Suze.